Young men are frightened of women.
Oh.
They're frightened of the power that women have to accuse them of so I mean, I think again, to look at it in a balanced way is to say, and a more objective way is to say that at some point society idealized men and diminished women. It needed to be
That's
balanced.
not true, and that's not looking at history through an objective lens. And we gotta dead this whole guilt trip that men have that now we have to endure feminism because men of the past were cruel to women. The first thing you should be thinking of is if men in the past were so cruel to women, how did women get all of the rights that they have today? It's because men gave them to them. The truth of the matter is, especially in America, women were always able to buy property. Women were always able to inherit wealth through their fathers. Women were always able to participate in business endeavors. Women were always in the workforce, whether that be teachers, nannies, nurses, service work. Often, to be honest, a lot of the jobs that they pick now, even with said freedom that they have, women were always doing these things. The only difference is really women prioritize family. And because they prioritize family, they were less likely to go into the workforce. There was a time literally 100 years ago where the average family size was 8 people, 8 children per family, because in this time it was before Social Security happened in the 1950s, and without Social Security, if you got old and you didn't have a bunch of children that could tend to your farm or take care of you, you were doomed. So women prioritized family. That was the only difference. But women could always go into endeavors like business and own land. I guess the only thing you could say is women weren't allowed to own bank accounts, but women were also not allowed to accrue debt. And if women did have debt, the responsibility of that debt would be on their father or on their husband, and they could go to jail if they were unable to pay off the debt that the woman had. So that's not looking at history through an objective lens to say that men were just beating and hitting and dragging and kicking women throughout history. That's not an objective lens. That's a feminist lens, and they use it as propaganda to justify the cruelty that they give to men today. They tell men today that we should suffer and we should be okay with suffering with the current rules because men of the past were cruel to women, and it's just not the truth. In history, there were good men, there were bad men, there were good women, there were bad women, and there were a lot of hard times for everybody, and we worked together to get through them. That's what history actually is from an objective lens. And I know I stopped the video a little bit early. I'm gonna give it some time, but I'm just saying we gotta dead this guilt trip idea that men should suffer and families should suffer today because in history women were oppressed. It's not true. Women just valued family more than they valued careers.
But in trying to balance it, we imbalanced it. It's the way, right? The pendulum swings from one side to the other. Women used to resent men because they were misogynistic, and now men resent women because they have so much
No,
power.
no, no, no. Women still resent men. And I think that men are starting to understand no matter how many concessions you give to women, the more society has bent this back, ruined families, more divorce, more children being born out of wedlock because women say they want this level of freedom, the more society has given women concessions, the less happy women have become by and large. So we're not doing women a service by giving them more concessions. And we've started to realize as men, it doesn't matter how much we concede to women, they're still going to be resentful towards men until they get everything that they want. And there is no such thing as getting everything that you want. So yeah, no, women still resent men. That's the issue.
Over young men. And young men are afraid. Quite frankly, the young men who come to see me are afraid of women. Either they're afraid that women are going to reject them because, as my son said, they all seem so together and they're all looking for, someone who's as together and can make lots of money, because we've also become a very material culture. So the idea that women will marry only at their level or above is also socioeconomically.
Oh yeah, for sure. You got to be
Yeah,
taller. You got to be good looking. I
right.
mean, my son has talked about this. He said the expectations even at high school age are super extreme.
Yeah,
It's
and
like you're looking
perfectionistic.
for this idealized thing, and the swipe apps allow you to just filter until you find somebody that looks like they meet this narrow criteria. And then the way that distributes is also crazy. Like the percentage of candidates that get swiped in the affirmative male to female is totally different. And
Yep.
so it's like we've got a lot more men being rejected and a lot more. So there's all these other things going on.
Well, remember what I said about boys being more fragile. They're more neurologically and emotionally fragile. Always were. It's
Yeah.
just the way of biology. They always have been.
I would
And
love to see the evidence that points to boys being more fragile. Because oftentimes they kind of try to skew it towards like, oh, boys are falling behind, boys are more fragile, but it's like boys aren't really falling behind. They've kind of been left behind because in every single sense we prioritize young girls over boys. They're not falling behind. They're literally being left behind, and nobody bats an eye.
and so when you take away their identity and you tell them that being boys and being masculine is bad and they're bad.
Yeah, like 90% of the teachers being women that come from these institutions that teach feminist propaganda, that teaches them that boys are can learn toxic masculinity and you should prevent that out of the boys before they even are old enough to even know anything. All of their teachers are women and they come from feminist institutions. Of course, they're going to demonize their behavior as abnormal just because they don't behave like little girls. That's literally what happens in the school system. Young boys at 6 years old are not meant to be sitting in a desk for 8 hours a day. That's not how they learn. They learn through being active. And they use their hyperness as like a passion and a force that drives them towards learning how to do practical skills with their hands. And even if you look throughout history, you'll see that girls have always been more literate than boys. That's just been the case because boys learn different than girls do. Since we've been tracking that, girls have always been more literate than boys.
And they're toxic. And, then you've basically robbed them of some of their confidence, some of their identity, and then they're afraid of what women can do to them, what young women can do to them. So it's a power imbalance, really. Men and women should share power always. Relationships are meant to be partnerships, meant to be teamwork. You don't generally have two CEOs. It doesn't generally work. You have a CEO, you have a CFO, you have a head of marketing, right? In any company, you have different roles that people play. We're not the same. We have different roles we play. We're a team. And so that idea has been exchanged for this idea of competition to be the same. So interestingly, when women were empowered, they didn't become better women, more like the best women they could be. They became like men.
No, 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 no. They just became irresponsible. You're not a man just because you do irresponsible stuff. If you want to be a man, go hold a door open, go change some oil, go work 50 hours a week for the next 30 years, and then have your shit taken and divorced. That's what men do. Those are manly things. Just being a degenerate, drinking and having sex with random people doesn't make you behave like a man. It makes you just irresponsible. And I think that's what a lot of women have become.
Right?
Even in the culture, we've seen this, right? The superhero, the female superheroes are like a copy and paste job.
Right.
It's like now you can beat up the giant Russian agents. And I'm not saying that's always bad. I mean, we've had great female superhero characters, but there is a kind of like thoughtless, copy and paste going on.
Paste, right. So I'm going to outdo men. I'm going to be a better man than a man. And
Impossible.
so what that diminished again is the yin and the yang, the sort of the team approach with two different genders that each had important, very important roles to play in society, in the workplace, so the idea that you can be equal in intelligence and ambition, but be different too. And that's all been
But that's
diminished.
that's the whole thing though. Women don't want men that are equal to them in intelligence, equal to them in how much money they make, equal to them in height. They want men that are superior in every single way to believe that they're equal to them. Like they want the man that's able to run a CEO, like a company, to not want to run his own house. Like it's almost like this weird thing with the equality thing. It's not like women want men that are their equals or that they. It's not that simple. Women want men that are better than them by every metric to believe that they're equal to them.
I've been playing around with something that's a really simple way to think about some of this. and not probably all that unique, but it seems like we had, I call it like the cultural bell curve. We had this natural order of things as tribal creatures, was that if you sort of say like along the horizontal axis is behavior and the vertical is social acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
There was a certain set of behaviors that were accepted, and if you weren't in the tribe and if you didn't obey the rules of the tribe, you were thrown off. It looked like a building. It was like flat at the top, or maybe graduated, like, but then steep fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And in response to that steep fall off and the total rejection of anything that wasn't inside of what's normal, came, I think, a well-intended desire to say, no, the ideal state is flat. All behaviors are equal, except not just acceptable, but there is no differences between any of us, between men and women, between people of different capabilities. Nope.
That's the blank slate theory, that everybody's equal, that I stand the same chance as LeBron James just because we grew up differently. Basically, our environment is what makes us not equal. And the scariest part about that line of thinking to me is the only way through that line of thinking you can make everything equal is if you have complete control. So I think that line of thinking, the blank slate theory, always leads to like totalitarianism, because the only way me and LeBron are going to be quote unquote equal in terms of our chances of entering the league, objectively, he's taller than me. But by this metric, if we're all blank slates, the only way we can level that playing field is if we control everything. And I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's the way the world works. I think we all have inherited abilities, and they're different than everybody else's, and some of them are advantages, and we have disadvantages too. Everybody has their advantages and disadvantages. Nobody's just equal or the same. And that blank slate theory BS is just like, oh, if we just control the environment, which is total control essentially, then we can make everybody equal and give everybody equal results, and it's just not true.
It's this sort of blank slate vision of humanity. And then the problem with that was that, well, the blank slate, except if you're a certain unacceptable, deplorable type, and then off the side you go.
Right.
And in reality, we've got this uncomfortable thing we have to face, that is what I'm hearing you say, which is behaviors distribute in certain ways that are just natural and are different, and there is masculinity and femininity. They're not in two different worlds, but they are different. To try to flatten that doesn't produce utopia. It produces a lot of social problems. It is like one step forward, three steps back. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah. So Freud said that there's masculinity and femininity in everyone, but he didn't. It's always misinterpreted that people say, well, that means everybody's bisexual. And that's not exactly what he meant.
What?
He meant that we all have masculine and feminine characteristics, just like we all have estrogen and testosterone. We all have oxytocin and, you know.
But men have like 10 times the testosterone, and it makes us respond to certain things differently at a hormonal level. It gives us a higher sex drive. In fact, if you want a woman to have a higher sex drive, one of the ways you can do that is to give them testosterone, and their sex drive will go up. So, like, yeah, we all have estrogen and testosterone, but I mean, if one of the genders has 10 times the amount as the other gender, it's safe to say that they're going to react and behave differently. That, like, way different.
And vasopressin, there's different hormones that we have, but to varying degrees. I mean, men have much more vasopressin, what we call the protective aggressive hormone. Women have more oxytocin, the sensitive nurturing, empathic nurturing hormone. You know, men produce oxytocin too, to a lesser degree, and when they produce it, it has a different behavior associated with it. It's more playful tactile stimulation with children, not sensitive empathic nurturing, you know. So there are just differences, and there have always been, to a varying degree, you know, for instance, maybe a woman would have masculine characteristics, but she'd still have more feminine ones. A man might have some feminine characteristics, but still more masculine ones.
Yeah, I agree that can happen.
I think
I agree
what we've done is we've taken that away, and we've said that, you know, women have to be 50% masculine or 80% masculine. Men, to be accepted in society as metrosexual, or have to be 80% feminine. And so, you know, we're not allowing for the differences. And I think that's really it's sad for society. It's troubling doing what I do in terms of parenting and seeing how children in this whole paradigm are the ones who are the losers. They're abandoned because if you have two people vying for the same role of being masculine, then you have nobody who's vying for the role of being feminine. So some
Bingo.
fathers are
Yeah.
vying for the role of being feminine, staying home with their kids. It's possible. But for the most part, what we have is a society that's become very masculine. But women are becoming more masculine than men. And that's pissing off men.
No, they're just becoming selfish and irresponsible. They're not becoming masculine. Masculine is taking on responsibilities and sacrificing for the responsibilities that you have in life. The women, they don't want to adhere to their responsibility to be the caregiver of the family, so they're abandoning it. They're abandoning it and giving it to men and telling men that it's our job to do the domestic duties and to prioritize family while they go and prioritize their careers. They're not actually becoming more masculine. They're just becoming selfish and degenerate.
It's an interesting way to think about it. It's like we're becoming more of the worst kind of masculine,
That's right. Right.
not a healthy
Right. So
masculinity.
the healthy part of masculinity was the protective aggressive part. I think I mentioned this on your last show, but for anyone who doesn't remember it, I'll mention it again. There was a study done where two or mother and father lay in bed together and the baby cries. And when the baby cries, the mother wakes up because she's very vigilant to the distress of the baby. The father sleeps through the baby's cries. As soon as there's rustling of leaves outside the window, the father wakes up and the mother sleeps through it. Why? Because the father is sensitive to predatorial threat. So what was the good part of masculinity? Being protective. It was protective,
But
aggressive.
but then do this though. What was also the good part of femininity? Because that's the part we always lose in these discussions. In these discussions, they're talking about the narcissistic expectations of women to go towards the top 10% of men. They talked about that a little bit earlier, but they never talk about combating that fact. They always just kind of go, men just need to be better. Right. So if you're going to acknowledge the better part of that dynamic is that men are willing to get up if there's a bad guy outside, you have to also recognize that a good part of that component is that women are willing to cater and prioritize the nurturing of the child. Because oftentimes people can tell you the role of a man. We all know the role of a good man. But when we talk about the role of a good woman, all of a sudden, if you put anything on a woman, you're misogynistic now. So yeah, if you're gonna point out the fact that in that scenario, the good role is that the man is willing to step up and protect and provide, of course, I agree with you. But then also you got to acknowledge the fact that the virtuous thing that the woman is doing is waking up and nurturing the child because they're designed, literally, how she's explaining it, designed at a hormonal and a biological level to do it that way.
Nature to protect your family. A father lion on the plains of Africa is going to protect his group, right? So that was the good part of masculinity. And what we've done is we've taken that away from men. Women say, I don't need you. And, you know, what's interesting is this election, where Trump got up and said, I'm going to protect you. And all of the feminist women said, I don't need protection. What do you mean? And the truth is that, you know, he wasn't eloquent in saying it, but there was an aspect of masculinity that was, I'm the daddy of the family. I'm going to protect my young. I'm going to protect my partner who's protecting my young. A team exercise. Whereas today, women are getting angry about that. They're resenting it. And so it leaves men identityless. It leaves them not knowing who they're supposed to be. Their hormones tell them to do one thing, but now women in society are telling them to do something else. It's both confusing and it strips men of their essential identity. By the way, it also strips women of their identity, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a it's funny because immigration is such a big issue this year.
Yeah, I think a bigger part of that issue is that women aren't expecting men to not be men. Women still expect men to be men. If there's a loud noise at the door, she's still going to expect her man to get up and go do something about it, or she's going to look at him different. The only issue is women are trying to also abandon their virtues and abandon their duties to be a part of the domestic labor by saying, I want you to still protect me and be a manly man and be willing to die and take a bullet for me, but I also want you to do the dishes too. because I just need help with with my job. So yeah, women still want men to be men. They just also want men to be women too, so they don't have to do anything but pursue their selfish desires to be in the workforce.
And not just in the U.S. and Western Europe, and I'm a right of center guy, but I am more pro immigration on average probably than even my viewers.
And I'm sorry, one last thing. Also, for the women who are going to work to help with the family, that's totally different because you're still doing something with the intention of family. I'm talking about the women who want to go to work as a way to build a safety net just in case their husband leaves them, even though women are the ones leaving the marriages at a 70% rate. So it's the women that are leaving. But they say they're going to work just to build a safety net in case their husbands leave them, and they still expect the men to contribute everything financially to the family whilst they still work but don't have to contribute anything. I'm talking about specifically those types of women. I understand that two income households for a lot of people seem to be pretty necessary, but I'm talking about your intentions in working and what are you actually working towards? Are you working towards building a better future for your family, or are you working towards building yourself a safety net just in case man bad and you have to leave them one day, which hardly ever happens. It's the women that just tend to leave when they feel unhappy.
They know
I think
that
you and I are sort of in the same place. Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
right of center, but still have liberal values. Yeah.
Yeah, properly understood.
Yeah.
Human dignity, universal human dignity.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that has sort of pushed to the macro scale is exactly what you're talking about. The destabilizing force, the sense of an actual foreign aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
And that the president saying, I will protect you, like it's primordial, the sense in which that connected with people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Not
protective aggressive. It was like, what happened to this? This was part of our evolutionary sort of way of being for millennium, for thousands of years. And what happened to it in just 75 years? You can't turn around evolution in 75 years. It doesn't work like that, right? So
now, how do you? Well, I have two questions. Let me start with the why. It's easy to say we as the society is very socializing, like definitionally, of responsibility.
Yep.
Why did this happen this way? How do you understand the causal forces? Is it whacked out academics taking things to the extreme and overtaking the academia? Like, it isn't like we all woke up and had a different way of thinking about this stuff. There are players and institutions and forces that have made this happen. So why? How do you understand what's taken place?
Well, again, I benefited from the feminist movement, but I would say the feminist movement was a little bit misdirected in its telling women that they should become more like men. Because from the beginning, they should have said, men and women are equally important to society. And you have a right to have choices. If you don't want to get married and have children, you should have that choice. You should have that choice to be out in the work world or to work, but it didn't, it undermined the differences between men and women. And that was the beginning of it, right? And so, as soon as we undermine the differences, so again, women became more like men, and then men were expected to become more like women. But it seems to me that women slipped into the role of masculinity more easily than men slipped into the role of femininity. And there's a reason, I think, for it, which is that what was expected of men for millennium is that they were the aggressors.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
They also had to perform, right? You have to perform sexually. Women don't have to perform sexually. Men have to perform sexually. That involves aggression. There's an aggressive, so we call it primal scene when children walk in on their parents having sex, because children perceive of
Freud
it.
stuff now.
Yeah, children perceive of it as aggressive. They get scared of it because it looks like daddy's doing something terrible to mommy. And the truth is, it's an aggressive act. It's a loving aggressive act in most cases, unless it's rape it's a loving aggressive, but it is an aggressive act. So men were always the aggressors. It was expected that men would step forward, ask women out, that men would take the initiative, that men would perform sexually. And so that was a very important part of men's identity. You take that away from men, and then you have those young men sitting in their bedroom, being afraid to be the aggressors, being afraid to take the initiation with a woman. Not only that they'll reject him, but that, you know, their masculinity being diminished, they won't be able to perform. I can't tell you how
Bro,
many
like
young
they
men.
gotta stop this. They gotta stop this whole narrative of boys being afraid of women. Men are not afraid of women. Boys are not afraid of girls. The bigger issue is that men are afraid of the ability that women have to be able to weaponize the state against them. So men, it's like one of those things where people go, men are afraid of marriage, men are afraid of commitment. No, men aren't afraid of marriage, men are afraid of divorce. Because that's how it's set up nowadays. Men would love to get married, but they're afraid of divorce because they understand the power that women have in divorce court that's given to them by the state. And when she's talking about why this stuff has happened, it's because it's an even exchange from women in the state. That's what's happening. Men have been sold out. Men have been sold out. Women have prioritized the state over men. And what women get in turn is they get a bunch of social security programs. They get prioritized in almost every domain. They get a lot of power in family court. They can falsely accuse men of anything they want. And largely, unless you can prove it, you're going to be seen guilty until proven innocent. So women get that safety net. And what does the government get? The government gets a voting block that they can control through fear. And so what we're seeing right now is a teaming up of women and the state to extract all of the value out of men, being willing to protect, provide, do the hard, dirty jobs to maintain society, really literally being willing to go to work and die for society. Society, the government, the state, everybody is extracting value from men without giving them anything in return. And that's what this is about. Women and the state teaming up. Men are starting to see women as agents of the state. Just a way for the state to take advantage of men in different ways to the benefit of women. And it's detrimental to children, too, by the way.
Are on ED medication.
So, yeah, I'm sorry. In conclusion, what I'm trying to say is men aren't afraid of women. Men are afraid of women. Men are afraid of the willingness of the state to enforce a woman's will just based off of hearsay, just based off of her word of mouth.
I was just thinking this. It was the next question I was going to ask. I've read about this, and it is, as an older guy, it's shocking to me that you're in your 20s and you're going to struggle to get an erection.
Well, there are websites now to provide medications online. I won't name them, but it's because there's such a demand. I have a psychiatrist I refer young men to who specifically deals with the emotional aspects of ED. It's not physical. You could say it's organic because, the emotions affect one's physical performance, but it's emotional. So again, men without their identity are lost. These young men are lost. They can't perform. And what we don't understand, and we're starting to understand because there's more research going on, when oxytocin levels go up, meaning when men are feminized, their testosterone goes down. Why? Because the investment in mammals, because we're just mammals, the investment in mammals in nurturing diminishes the investment in mating. So when we nurture and become more feminine as men, I'm not a man, but your testosterone levels go down. So what's happening is there's less sex going on and there's less good sex going on. And men are having a harder time performing, and they're needing to take these medications to perform.
Well, I understand. Is this part of the sort of the dad brain effect? So, when Warren Farrell has talked to me about this, and he writes about it in his book that, we as men, I experienced it when my son was born. You get rewired. And you do become more nurturing. You change what you are when you become a dad.
But the way that dads are nurturing, which is playful, tactile stimulation, resilience building, encouraging exploration, separation. So what we're finding is with these single mothers by choice, women who go out to a sperm bank and,
Yeah.
say, I can't find a man. This is
Basically,
like,
women who prioritize their careers, and now they're prioritizing their happiness and fulfillment to have a child over the actual results that that child will have to face in the real world because they came from a single mom. So basically, the sacrificing of the child's basically ability to be a functional member of society just so that women can fulfill this weird "I don't need a man" thing.
a phenomenon. There's plenty of men around. I can't find a man to love.
Who's
Okay.
6'5" and makes 150K and
Right,
has
right.
a PhD because I have my master's.
Right. So I'm going to go to a sperm bank. Now they go to a sperm bank. They have a baby on their own. These babies can attach to the mothers, but there's no one to help with the separation because fathers were always the vehicle of separation. Mothers were the attachment object, love object. Fathers were the separation, love object. So without fathers around, babies sleep in their mother's beds for a very long time. They don't learn to separate in the same way. They don't have a model and learn how to be masculine from a masculine role model. They don't learn to regulate their aggression. And so this is a problem. But obviously, the biggest problem is that, you have little boys out there not learning to be boys and not learning to be men.
Well, you don't find any role models in school, so
No.
this is
They're all women.
This is the sort of terrifying feedback loop of leaving the world in fatherlessness, right? It's like, so you have fatherlessness, it creates this imbalanced, psychologically fragile, broken situation that
See, they're all talking about symptoms of feminism without directly blaming feminism and saying that it's bad for society because they have to keep this open-ended. Every conclusion that they're drawing, women have narcissistic dating habits, so much so to the point where they will sacrifice their child-rearing years and take a move out of desperation where they have a child without a father even involved because the father that they wanted for the guy or for their kid isn't 6'5". That's literally what they're basically saying. That's like essentially what they're saying. The woman, she couldn't find a guy that was 6'5", so she goes to a sperm bank and has a kid. Basically, instead of being with a man that's around her same level in terms of attractiveness or what she qualifies for the sake of her own happiness or for the ability to just say I'm an independent woman, blah 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 bitty bloop, she will have a child on her own before she has a child with a regular man, which is insane to me. And so they're pointing out the narcissism and the traits that come from feminism and its effects on women without directly attributing it to women. And that's frustrating. Anytime you hear these conversations, this is what it is.
And repeats itself because now you're a worse mate. So you're getting shunted off into incel territory.
That's right. Because again, incel territory is limbo. It's purgatory. It's neither here nor there. That's really what it is. You're not a girl, but you don't feel like a boy. I mean, people that listen to this are going to get upset with that, but that is the truth. Because we're not allowing boys to be boys, not awful boys, not toxic masculinity, just protective, aggressive, taking initiative, allowing boys to be masculine. And
there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's just good people and bad people. And if masculinity was toxic, children without fathers would do better, and that's just not the result. It's just another one of those conversations, and I'm gonna keep it brief here at the last closing statements. This is just one of those conversations where you got two people talking about the issue from a feminine lens. They refuse to admit the female part in this, still demonizing men. Pretty much, men be better. Essentially, men need to be better. Boys have been abandoned. Boys aren't falling behind. Boys are being left behind, but boys still need to be better. Like, that's always the conclusion that people come to when it comes to these topics. So it's not a surprise to me. But I like to combat it a little bit. I think these topics are fun. But let me know in the comments below if this video was a W or L, and give me the HBO special. That's a Help Brother Out special. Hit the like and the subscribe button for more content. Till next time.